is the chairperson of the London School of Economics Alumni Association of India, and Mr. Ashish Kumar Chauhan is the CEO of the BSc. Good evening, everyone. My name is Lisa Mangaldas, and I head the Columbia Alumni Association's Bombay chapter along with Karen. We're the co-presidents of the chapter, and we're really glad to have all of you here at our event with the London School of Economics and the British Deputy High Commission. We're also really, really grateful for the support of Citibank, Begin, and the venue partnership with BSc. It's really wonderful that such a diverse array of companies are seeing merit in supporting an initiative that centers around learning. EVOKE is our baby, and we're really, really excited to be doing this for the second year in a row. It's our effort at creating a slice of university culture for the public of Bombay. I'm going to let Samyak tell you a bit more about it.
Hi, I'm Samyak Chakrabarti, Lisa's co-curator for EVOKE. EVOKE is a platform to enable dialogue, idea sharing, and meeting of like-minded people to learn about issues that are not part of conventional academic discourse or otherwise. I'll let Lisa speak more about this year's theme, and then we start.
I think that money is just such a relevant topic, both on a personal, individual level. It's the thing that can keep some of us awake at night. But it also, obviously, on a national and global level, it's such a relevant issue and a perennially relevant issue. So I think that there's no real justification for having an evening that discusses this extremely fascinating, extremely important topic in all of our lives and in the life of this city, in the life of this country. So we're really excited to be joined by wonderfully accomplished speakers today. And before I proceed to introduce our first speaker, I'd like to ask Saloni to, on behalf of LSE, welcome you all. Saloni?
I'm going to talk a little bit about the LSE Alumni Association, which is why we're here. Established in 2005, the Alumni Association was meant to be a consultative and advisory sounding board regarding the lifelong alumni programs developed and run by the LSE's Office of Development and Alumni Relations. It was meant to represent the voice of the LSE alumni community within the school. The diversity of LSE's alumni creates a unique network worldwide with over 100 alumni countries and special interest groups and contact networks in over 190 countries. You will find LSE alumni all over the world. The Alumni Association works to provide events and online networking to engage this alumni globally. Today, I'm happy to announce, and Mukulika will take this forward, the South Asia Center at the LSE, which is going to be devoted to the study of South Asian studies, along with providing a platform from which they will launch a coordinated and sustained engagement with the region. There are more than 70 LSE academics currently working on South Asia, seeking innovative solutions to the region's economic, demographic, and development challenges. The South Asia Center will lead the school's long-term engagement with South Asia by facilitating multidisciplinary approaches and comparative research by LSE academics. The LSE Alumni Mumbai chapter, which is what we are involved in, works actively with schools and their alumni associations from across Europe and America to support and promote intellectual and cultural activities amongst its members. Our focus is to provide increased opportunity for meaningful engagement, which we are able to do with partners like Columbia University, with EVOKE, through events like EVOKE today, which not only help to increase awareness, participation, and pride, but also assist in bridging the gap between the world of business and academia. We earlier hosted this year Dr. Nasir Munji for the LSE alumni, prominent lawyer Zia Modi of AZB and Chambers of AZB with Cambridge and Harvard alumni, and Dr. Nirmalya Kumar of the Tata Group with LBS Wharton and the INSEAD alumni. We wish to continue doing this through our speaker series and motivational talks for alumni members and keep the community active and encourage lively engagement between the members. So without taking much time, I'll now hand over to Lisa to continue with the event.
Our first speaker this evening is Dr. Mukulika Banerjee. Dr. Banerjee is Associate Professor at the Department of Anthropology at the London School of Economics and the incoming Director of the newly launched South Asia Centre. Her academic areas of interest include popular perceptions of democracy and the culture of elections across socioeconomic strata. She has just completed a book called Why India Votes, which is the result of an interdisciplinary research project examining electoral participation at the grassroots level in India to analyze evolving forms of democratic governance. She will be speaking today on how socioeconomic background and income levels affect voter participation, among other themes that her book discusses. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Banerjee.
Good evening, everybody. And welcome. Since I'm the first speaker, I feel on behalf of all my fellow speakers, I want to say a big welcome to all of you who've made the time to come this evening. And it's wonderful to see such a critical mass of alumni from some of the world's best universities. I myself am an Oxford alumnus, along with Hugh Martin here, who is the LSE Director, Craig Calhoun's Chief of Staff. Apologies, I convey sincere apologies from Professor Calhoun for not being here himself. He would have loved to have been here, but he has the LSE to run, and there is a very important board meeting today which requires his presence, so he can't be here. But that does give me an opportunity to say a few things around this issue of money and elections, which is what my own research is about, which I hope will be of completely contemporary and immediate interest, given that all of us are reading that in the headlines at the moment. But before I talk about that, just to continue, I think Saloni has given you a very good introduction to the South Asia Centre at LSE. Now, I must just underscore that this is a new initiative, very much that the LSE is setting up at the moment, which it hasn't done before. Partly because we took back and took stock sat back and looked at the concentration of expertise we have at the London School of Economics of research on India. And these 70 academics and lots of students, some of them are sitting in this room, people who have come to study at LSE, who engage in dialogue, who carry their training forward in different streams of life, in the different kinds of careers you pursue. We wanted to bring this wonderful expertise together and give it greater visibility. So as I'm here, I wanted to personally, as the incoming director of the South Asia Centre, invite all of you, and not just LSE alumni, but everybody to engage with the South Asia Centre, to send us your ideas, to think of things that we should be doing together. LSE is not going to set up a campus in India, as many of our illustrious contemporaries have done. Instead, what we intend to do is engage in dialogue to create, to see what LSE can do in India that is useful, that's something that LSE can uniquely do. And as the alumni of that institution, you are our best brand ambassadors, best critics, best interlocutors, best generators of ideas. And we really look forward to hearing from you. Please get in touch. Okay, let me spend a few minutes then just talking about money and elections. And I thought, I'm not an economist. I don't work on monetary policy. Can't talk about exchange rates knowledgeably. But what I can talk about is something that all of us as citizens of India, and yes, I am a citizen of India. I have lived and taught and continue to teach in British higher education for 23 years. All of us as citizens of India constantly ask the question every time elections come round, can you buy a vote? Is it possible to buy votes? And in India, when we try to explain electoral results, when they emerge, when campaigns are on, all of us wonder whether money comes into it. Election expenditure is a huge issue. It's something that the Election Commission of India has been paying a lot of attention to. There's been a lot of work that has been done behind the scenes, and of course, the press, quite rightly, has been trying to focus on it. I think it should do even more than it does. We won't talk about, in a sense, I'm taking election expenditure as a given, that parties spend enormous amounts of money on campaigns of elections. And what is this money spent on is something all of us know anecdotally about. I think the demographic of people in this room, I would assume that personally as a voter, your vote has never been, nobody has attempted to buy your vote, but as members of institutions, of corporations, there are very interesting linkages, what people call the corporate political axis, where what happens between media houses, corporations, and politicians is an untold story, but we are all aware of it. And as members of these institutions, you know that money is absolutely central to how politics is done and created in India. When you turn the question around and say, okay, so money is spent, we're taking that as given, media houses, corporations, politicians, all of them are involved in this. But what about the electorate? What about the normal 720 million voters that this country has? It is the biggest humanly organized event in the world. When India has a national election, nothing matches in scale. 15 million polling officials, 8 million polling booths, 1 million electronic voting machines. I mean, the scale is massive. And we have to ask, why is it that we are so good at pulling off something that is so labyrinthine and enormous in a way that we can't do anything else in India? You know, if we only could show this kind of efficiency in other spheres of life, we would be somewhere else. We wouldn't have sub-Saharan levels of poverty, we wouldn't have malnutrition, we wouldn't have infant mortality, the rates at which we do. And yet in the middle of all of this is this extraordinary statistic which staggers the world, which is that regardless of what is happening in the electoral arena, regardless of who's standing for elections, voter turnout rates in India are amongst the highest in the world, number one. So you've seen, do you know what their voter turnout rates have been on an average in the last 4 state assembly elections in the last few weeks? Yeah, it's about 70%, 70 to 75%. So that's the kind of rate of voter turnout we're talking. We're the envy of the world. The second startling, and the important thing to note there is that not only are voter turnout rates very high, the trend is on the rise. So we are not seeing a growth of voter apathy, which you get in other democracies, in Western democracies, for instance. Voting, of course, is not compulsory in India, as it is in Australia, Greece, other democracies. The second trend, which is very interesting, is that the more local the election, the higher the turnout. Again, extraordinary. As a Commonwealth citizen, I get to vote in every British election. Local elections, nobody shows up unless there is a real issue. But voter turnouts tend to go up. Thirdly, women and men vote in equal numbers, consistently. Now, when these statistics were first revealed by the National Elections Survey in 1998, they got in touch with me and said, look, we can show these startling statistics, but like everybody else, we have absolutely no reason why this is happening. And this is why, as an anthropologist, as a sociologist, as I would be called in India, I trained at the Delhi School of Economics, I've been doing ethnographic research into this. Now this book, and it's wonderful to have screens as well so you can really see the cover. This is the book that's come out, Why India Votes, that was kindly mentioned in the introduction by Lisa. This book is a study of the last national elections in 2009, when the Lok Sabha elections were held the last time in this country. We designed a comparative qualitative ethnographic research project in 12 sites across India. So the sites were Delhi, Western UP, Eastern UP, Bihar, West Bengal, Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Maharashtra, Gujarat, Rajasthan. So it's a pretty good spread. We couldn't get researchers to work in the Northeast. He's the only one who pulled out. And there's a mix of urban-rural, there's a mix of different kinds of contests, and the story of all of those are in here. But the 4 things that I want to talk about, that are the findings of this book. There are lots of findings, and that's why it's a 300+ page book, competitively priced at under 500 rupees, so do get your copies. I have to do this. I owe this to my publishers and to my researchers. But the 4 things that, do I have 5 minutes, Lisa, to talk? Okay. So the 4 things I want to talk about are, if you're talking about can a vote be bought, the short answer is, on the whole, no. And this is not my opinion. This is what research shows. And the reason why votes cannot be bought in India are amongst these 4 reasons. When an election campaign is held in India, what people value most about a campaign is that it is like a carnival. And that doesn't just mean the fun and games and the late night speeches and the music and the processions, but also the meaning of a carnival. The reason why carnivals are temporary and short-lived is because it's a complete reversal of social order. So what people say is that, you know, the slums in Bandra, where we did some of this research, they say, you know, for the rest of the time, we are completely forgotten as poor, illiterate people. But during the campaign, politicians, however wealthy, however senior, however powerful, have to come with folded hands, with bowed heads, to come and ask for our vote. On that one day, we are the ones who are asking questions. We can hold them accountable. We can, in a way that is not possible to hold the government to account when they come into power. So there's that carnivalesque feature of elections. Now, the most startling statistic, actually, which I should have highlighted, is that not only are voter turnout rates so high in India, voter turnouts, if you were to take out people like us in this room, if you were to take out urban middle-class people out of the demographic, if you were left with a concentration of small-town, rural, largely illiterate voters, the voter turnout rates are nearly 100%. That is the puzzle. So the people whose lives are getting least better over a period of time, from one government to the next, are the most enthusiastic voters. So of course, the ordinary unresearched response to this is to say, oh, these are poor people. You know, you can tell them what to do. You can buy their votes. That's what parties spend so much of their money on. So one of the first questions I asked about the election campaign to voters all over the country was, do you get offered money? Of course we do. Do you have alcohol? Of course there's alcohol. I get saris. Just yesterday I picked up a sari. I got a liter of kerosene. I got, there's going to be chicken cooked tomorrow. It's the only time in 5 years that we get to eat chicken, and so on. So I asked them, so does this mean, who gave you the best gift? And they said, oh, maybe, this time X party gave me a really good sari, so I'm going to, so that's what I got. That was the best gift. So does this mean you're going to vote for X party? And they look at me as if I have an IQ of 2. They cannot understand the question. Why does the issue of what I got from X party in a campaign determine whether I will vote for them? And the response from illiterate people around the country is, do you really think, as an educated person as you look, that my vote costs just enough to pay for a sari? You think it's that cheap? The reason I take a sari is because if you had only one sari, which you had to wash and wear every day, if somebody offered you a free sari, you would take it. But what does that have to do with who I vote for? This kind of riposte that comes back again, and then we have a much longer discussion about why, what it actually is worth. The second thing, those are kind of two related points, and I'll come back to the second one. The third thing, which is very important in determining why you cannot vote, is that the actual experience of people when they go to cast their vote at a polling booth is possibly the most unique experience they have in public life in India. If you are a sweeper, if you are a farmer, if you are somebody who becomes invisible in the public gaze because we live in such a deeply, deeply socially unequal society that we don't know names of people who drive our cars, or we don't know the names of people who clean our buildings. They are nameless humanity who work. Suddenly, those kinds of people show up at a polling station, they are treated like anybody else. They are treated as an individual with a name and a number, and if you have your photo identity card, you can vote. It doesn't matter who is standing in the queue in front of you. They can't say, sorry, you smell, or sorry, you look uneducated, or sorry, I don't stand next to people from your caste. You have to stand next to them. So there's a social leveling that occurs in the polling booth queue, which is of enormous significance. For that one day, people glimpse what genuine political equality is about. They experience it. And this means something. And the fact, and the reason why we put this on the cover, is because this fact that everybody's left index finger is marked in the same way, regardless of who they are. The President of India has it, as indeed anyone else. That kind of social leveling that achieves, people will tell you, and people have said this to me up and down the country, this is what the notion of Ek Din Ka Sultan is. And if the notion of Ek Din Ka Sultan, an emperor for a day, is not popular sovereignty, I don't know what is. And finally, when you ask the people the question, why do you vote? We got a range of different responses. And a lot of those responses turned around the idea of duty and right. This is a foundational right that we have that is free. If you're poor, if you're an activist, if you're a Dalit, if you're a child and you're asking for a school, if you're a mother and you want better vaccination programs for your children, if you're a farmer and you need better diesel prices, how can we ask for anything else if we don't exercise the one right that is run well in this country? Elections are genuinely free and fair. The fact that it is free and the fact that it happens on our doorstep. Why wouldn't you do it? How can we ask for something else? So it's our duty, it's our dharma to vote. And with this duty, by exercising this duty, you're establishing your most important foundational right. And people will say, I remember talking to a man in the Sundarbans, practically on the Bangladesh border. It took about 15 hours of journeying from Kolkata to get to it. And that man sitting there is saying, when I ask him, why do you vote? He's saying, if I don't even vote, the country is going to forget people like me exist. And the fact that we have such a vast population of people who are indeed forgotten by us, forgotten by policymakers, forgotten by governments, forgotten by venal politicians, is something that is true, and this is their way of asserting their belonging to a nation, and something that they remind, the fact that we have 75% voter turnouts in Chhattisgarh suddenly reminds you that there are all these people in Chhattisgarh who are committed to the electoral process. So on the basis of this, I'll just conclude by saying that I've been thinking about this question of why on earth, really what you should call the book is, why on earth do people vote? Because like voters anywhere in the world, the one issue that the entire world seems to be united about is that politicians are corrupt and venal. Right? Everybody seems to agree this. In Britain they say this, in the US they say this, everywhere. This is one thing everybody agrees. So if the electorate understands this in India, as it does elsewhere, the reasons why they continue to vote is because the act of casting your vote itself is a significant one. It has become a sacrosanct duty. It has become a festival of modern democratic India. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Banerjee. We're going to take 3 questions after each speaker presents. So, does anybody have a question for Dr. Banerjee? We only have time for 3, so.
How come the political parties haven't got it as yet, and why do they still continue to invest, or it's not actually investment, put money behind this activity?
Thank you. Shall I take one question at a time? Okay. Thank you. It's a great question. And it is, in fact, one that I have from Chhattisgarh, some data, where we couldn't record it, obviously, but we happened to hear this negotiation between the Congress and the BJP, who are the 2 main parties who fight it out and are fighting it out in this election too, where after the last Lok Sabha elections, they were saying, this is crazy. All this money we are spending is not getting us anywhere. But the negotiation was that one of us can't stop. Both of us have to stop simultaneously. You couldn't have one party spending money and the other not. And that requires an understanding of between parties, which has to happen. But academic study, there's a book called On Vote Buying, which is a multi-country study of 15 countries. And in fact, the study across the world's democracy shows that vote buying is the least guaranteed way to win an election. And India, you know, we talk about the incumbent, anti-incumbency thing in India. We talk about the canny Indian voter and so on. Frankly, if expenditure could win you elections, parties who spend the most money should win elections, which we know is not the case. Thank you.
Now the new thing has been involved that if you don't like the candidates, then you can stamp the other one like none. What will be the impact of that one for future?
I think we should have this conversation on on the 8th of December, of course, I want to know which party wins elections, and especially Delhi is my city. I want to know who's going to form the Delhi government very much, especially because, as we all know, there's a special story going on in Delhi about whether you can have an issue-based party like Aam Aadmi cut into, really change the electoral discussions around not just, what do they call it? Not just to substitute an alternative. Can we have substitutes and alternatives? But the question, the data that I'm most interested in seeing is how many people press the button of none of the above, the nota button. And that's going to tell us a lot. And we are going to, I have a 3-year project running until 2015, looking at state assembly and panchayat elections. And the researchers are doing the 4 states now. And we are going to pick up on this finding, look at this figure, and then start asking people and testing whether this does catch on or not. We're going to monitor this very closely.
Professor Banerjee, is it? Professor Banerjee, I have a question which is to do with voter sentiments, particularly in urban pockets. Now, I know from friends in our circle, there's a lot of apathy. People don't want to go out and vote because they don't believe in it. There's this argument that politicians are apathetic to our needs. It's not us. So what do you think, what do you do with something like that? What are your thoughts on this? Is it the politicians? Where do you correct this problem? Or the people?
Well, clearly, there's a debate raging around this in the UK. There's been big public debate in the last few weeks around this issue, where, somehow seen to be voting is endorsing an apathetic political establishment. Now, at one level, when we go around the country, if you are talking to somebody who has to fight for electricity and water and a primary health center and an education, people do turn around and say, when you ask me the question, why do I vote? It is a question coming from somebody, regardless of whether you vote or not, you will have electricity and you'll have fuel in the car and you'll have food in the table. For us, voting has to be about, we have to participate, we have to show that we are engaged in this process for the system to engage with us. So this issue why the middle class needs to vote cannot be about everyday security, because it isn't. But to withdraw from the system and not to hold governments that are non-performing to account, to somehow not, to not vote them out. Because of course, if you're upset with the government, that's what people say, I don't vote. People, of course, governments are corrupt and politicians are venal, but we can throw them out in 5 years, and we are at least able to register that. So why wouldn't you do that? Why wouldn't you, how difficult is it to show up at your polling booth, which is within walking distance of your house, and at least vote against the person you hate so much, or press the none of the above button if that's going to be widely adopted. But then, clearly, just going and casting your vote is not enough. When there are initiatives of, whether they're third sector initiatives, which we are going to hear about later, whether they are different kinds of political formations coming to be, then somewhere there has to be some sense of shramdan, of some sort of support for alternatives. Otherwise, to say, oh, the Congress and the BJP are no good, they're equally corrupt, and therefore I'm not going to vote, is the apathy that comes from luxury. You can afford to be apathetic.
Do you think, sorry, if I can just come in there, do you think that would convince parties to field better candidates?
If people don't vote, not at all. Not at all. That is, apathy is not going to lead to any change. Be rest assured of that.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry we don't have time for more questions with Dr. Banerjee, and unfortunately she actually has to leave for the airport. She has a flight to catch, so apologies to everybody that she won't be here for the whole event. But thank you for that. That was wonderfully insightful. Thank you.
Our next speaker, Mr. Ashish Kumar Chauhan. He is the Managing Director and CEO of the Bombay Stock Exchange Limited, Asia's first stock exchange. He serves on the board of ICCL, CDCL, BSc Training Institute, BFSI Sector Skill Council, and Marketplace Technologies Limited. He is also the member of the board of the governors of IIT DNM, Jabalpur, and a few SEBI committees. He is also currently the chairman of the Advisory Committee on Technology of FMC, member of several other SEBI committees and government regulatory authorities. He recently has been the recipient of the Zee Business Awards for Business Transformation. Ashish has over 22 years of experience in financial markets and technology. He was the member of the 5-people team that set up the NSE and also set up the NSE's equities and derivatives segment. I welcome Ashish to talk about the changing demographics of wealth. Stage is yours.
Let me I am not a professor, so I take liberty of giving numbers which may be wrong. I'm trying to give a message, and everything is a propaganda. So don't take what I say as a gospel truth. But effectively, I'm trying to give you a message, and it may not be correct. Having said that, basically, for me, these questions have always been in my mind, saying how the demographics changing. What is wealth? How does India treat wealth, And so if I sort of look at the wealth as a concept, in India, we never worshipped wealth because we never had. So we figured it's better to worship people who don't have wealth. So if you look at our mythology, we had great wealthy people who were worshipped, initially. There's Rama and Krishna and all, they were kings. And then something broke. And from Buddha and Mahavir time, that is around 2,500 years back, give and take 500 years, we started worshipping people who don't have wealth, people who had great wealth. In fact, Krishna was not born into a family which was wealthy. He kind of created a myth about himself when he was alive, saying, I was actually born into king's family, but I was given to poor family and I'm a king, But effectively, he grew up in a very poor family and he became king by his own deeds. But the guys who we kind of created trend of not worshipping wealth were both kings, Buddha and Mahavir. Both came out almost within 40, 50 years of each other, but they started worshipping, or they started creating a framework of renunciation. And that's where, I think most of us know about Buddhism, few of us know about Jainism, but basically they have similar, or if you look at their similar tenets, if you look at it, they have very different tenets, but effectively, almost 2,000 years, we had a framework which was basically about not worshipping wealth. Getting wealthy was a great sin. You had committed some sin or some crime, that's why you came into wealth. And it was, in some sense, a reaction of not having wealth, saying if I don't have wealth, or if most of us don't have wealth, then let it be, those guys are bad and we are good. That was basically my theorization. Second thing is, of course, the other way around, that I think earlier speakers said that India is a very unequal, very, very cruel society to most people staying within for almost 5,000 years. That is, Krishna couldn't call himself a king, even in North India, and so he had to run away to what we call Gujarat in Dwarka. Shivaji, who came from this part of India, couldn't be coronated as a king because he was from very low caste, and so he had to actually hire Brahmins from North India who didn't know him. So India is a very, very cruel society to most of its citizens for last 5,000 years. Only last 67 years, post-independence. In fact, pre-independence also there were movements, but post-independence is where India is trying to become equal. So for me, the wealth means a lot of different things to different people. But effectively, somewhere in the line, if you see the demographics part of it, it's very, very interesting. When India became independent, India had around 40 crore people, that is 400 million people, give and take probably 5%. Today, in 67 years, we have become 3 times, or probably slightly more than 3 times that much. How did that happen? It's basically life expectancy used to be around 40 years. Today, it's around 70 years, right? So more and more people started living more sort of longer and longer. And so now you have sort of more people. Today, India is occupying landmass of 2% of the world landmass. 2%. And it has 16% of world population. 1 out of every 6 human being is actually in India. We have, of course, many more cows than so we might be having 1 out of every 3 cows and probably 1 out of every 4 pigs and so on and so forth. But effectively, 1 out of every 6 humans is in India. And India is a very interesting country. It's not very hot, not very cold. It doesn't require too much to live. The number of calories a person needs to consume is very little vis-a-vis, say, in Iceland. Because it's a reasonably, climate is not so bad. An Indian doesn't need to heat his house for 6 months or 4 months in a year with heating oil. An Indian doesn't need a lot of clothing, winter wear and summer wear and XYZ, It's the same clothes earlier they used to wear and then sleep on it, and then again when they wake up they wear, Why I'm telling you this is the concept of wealth or the GDP per capita and all, sometimes may be very misleading. When you visit a dentist in US, it's $400 or $400 per visit for the same pain you get when you visit an Indian dentist in a village, which basically may be $10 or 20 Indian rupees, not USD, right? So that is a part of their GDP. 400 USD is a part of that GDP, right? And 10 rupees part of GDP here. We tend to generalize. It's basically, I'm not saying the numbers are wrong. I'm saying many times we tend to generalize, and some of it may not be so obvious in terms of the ability for a person to live sort of easily a good life, not a life of luxury, is very different in India vis-a-vis what you would do in North America or in Europe and so on and so forth, right? So that is one sort of piece of information I wanted you to have, saying the GDP per capita itself is not actually comparable. Again, one more piece of information, I could be completely wrong, but I can do it with authority, is that India spends 4% of its puny GDP on healthcare. On a $2 trillion, which I'm adding up few billion for few hundred billion here and there, but I presume, or it's a prayer and a hope that India will be $2 trillion this year, right? So on a $2 trillion, I'm spending 4% of GDP, right? That is $80 billion. With a life expectancy of 73. US spends 20% of GDP on a $15 trillion. It is $3 trillion on health. You can say, no, it is not 20%, it's 15%, and GDP is not 15 trillion, but it's 12 trillion. Still, it will be 1.5 trillion if multiply 12 by 12, okay? Or 12 by 15 will be 1.8 trillion. India has 3 times more people than US has. They have basically 40 crore, we have 127 crore, right? And our entire GDP is lower than the money they spend on healthcare. Can you believe it? They are spending, and out of that 3 trillion, I think 2.5 trillion, I'm sure I'm completely wrong, but I think $2.5 trillion they are spending for a person to live from 83 years to 84 years. Okay, that is the wealth of a nation. A nation which makes its people aspire to live longer and longer. right? Especially after 65. So somewhere on the line, this wealth is a very interesting conundrum. Around 3 years back, I joined here around 4 years back. 3 years back, we had I'm taking the track into a different league altogether. India has a very interesting demographics today. It's, of course, the largest Hindu nation in the world. There is another, we are not a Hindu nation by the concept of being Hindu nation. We are a secular nation, but we are very large. We have a very large population, which is Hindu. But we are the second largest Muslim country in the world. We have almost 15 to 18 crore people. Indonesia is the largest. We are larger than Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, everything else put together. We also are probably the 20th largest Christian country in the world. We have around 3 crore Christians, or probably now 3.5 crore, 35 million. And we have many Jews, which we are not aware, but especially Bombay has a synagogue which was attacked recently, right? And they are Indian Jews. And we have many more other people. And last census, around 1970s, there were 1,560 languages. Again, don't take me on my number, but I'm not making up. Somewhere I have read this. It could be languages or it could be something else. But 1,560 languages, okay? So many ethnicities, so many races, and within each race, we have a consistency that we have castes. And we have the lowest caste people who are basically what we call Dalits and so on and so forth. They lead very poor life, most of them. And then we have various other people. But effectively, that is our demographics. Out of 127 crore people, 50% Indians are less than age 25.
So you have a minute left.
Okay. So we have 50% Indians who are aged less than 25. When they come into the job market, and we are going to remain like this for pretty long, almost till 2050. We are going to remain very young. And the young people have aspirations which are very different. They use technology and so on and so forth. And so, somewhere on the line, my biggest worry, or what I say, that India's job for next 20 years is to create jobs. Every year, India has to create 15 million new jobs, 1.5 crore new jobs, okay? Europe, US, Japan, even China are worried about keeping the employment rate at 8%, 9% on declining population. India is adding a new Australia into its job market every single year for next 20 years. And it has to create those jobs. And how do we create those jobs? And for me, BSE comes that. Last 139 years, BSE has helped India create jobs. It has helped India create $1.1 trillion of wealth, which is not big from US standards. It's still big. And for next 20 years, we think we will have from 2.5% of India investing in stock markets. We'll have probably 20% India investing in stock markets. From $1.1 trillion of market cap, we'll probably have $25 trillion of market cap. But if we don't create jobs, then this may not happen. So for me, one of the biggest issues India is currently facing is what I call job creation. And hopefully we'll continue to create jobs. We had a different perspective vis-a-vis China. Time is not there. But some other time, some other day. Many thanks for calling me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for a wonderful talk. Just 1 second, sir. Mr. Chauhan, questions. Anybody with questions? The gentleman in the suit behind. Sharam. Lisa, could you just pass on the mic? There.
Here you go.
We'll just take 3 questions. And please keep your questions short and no comment, only a question.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for that. And thank you, Professor, for the very interesting talk. My name is Karnveer Mundre, and like Saloni, I head the Bangalore chapter of LSE Alumni. My question is about the job last comment. I believe I'm an entrepreneur and I run a biopharma consulting firm. And the challenge, I believe, when I hire every day is not that there are no jobs, but as you also would have seen, that there's a distinct change in the attitude. Today, there are hundreds and hundreds of industries around the country. There are hundreds of agricultural farms which are empty because of lack of people to over there. There are jobs at every level, from the bottom to the top. There is even in the army, navy, defense, there is lack of people to fill those jobs. I don't think there is a question of jobs. So I just wanted to have your opinion on this topic, because everyone starts by saying that we need to create jobs, but when you actually try to go and hire, it's difficult to hire in today's market.
No, I agree. Basically, if I want to pay less, I will get nobody. If I want to pay more, you will get hundreds of them, I can assure you. Right? So for me, it's basically demand-supply equation. And try paying a little more, you will get people.
Next question. Neeraj. Mike is right next to you. Could you just stand as well, please? Sorry, just 1 second. The mic's not working. Or sound, take mine.
I'll repeat it if you want.
So, my question is, you mentioned about creating jobs and employment opportunities for people in India, and in fact, that's the last thing that I think Prime Minister Manmohan Singh also mentioned about. Should we also move into the space where we talk about creating job security for people, considering that, as you mentioned about stock market and what we have seen in the US, financial crisis, I think that's the time when we should also look at job security.
Okay, it's an interesting concept, you know. How did Western world solve its problem of job security? By creating what we call social security. When you have a social security, you get food, you get money for children, and so on and so forth. This is an issue which was resolved in, I think, 1950s in Western world, and 1930s to 1950s in vis-a-vis communism and capitalism. So if the firms had to continue to take care of the employees who were not willing to update their knowledge, or even if the company becomes irrelevant, still they had to be paid money year after year, month after month, and all the increments and inflationary expenditure and so on forth. Basically what Western world did is that state will take care of the guy or the girl for so many days and so many years. And then the firm is basically saying you can go up or down depending on your demand in the job scale. So what India is trying to resolve in terms of the food security and right to this and right to that, in my opinion, is basically trying to figure that, because you can't change labor laws. If we are worried, I'm going into a slightly different issue of labor laws and so on and so forth, that labor laws are very stringent. But if you, especially on the companies, if you change the labor laws, then there is a job insecurity. And that, how do you resolve? Is by basically giving other form of security so that person is able to survive in a dignified way and so on and so forth. That's how India is slowly getting into that mode. Many of us don't understand, but society is actually in real time negotiating using elections and manifestos and lack of it and so on and so forth. But these are basically the ways India is trying to resolve the same issue you said about the job security. And India ended up giving job security to organized labor. And so you had basically not many people wanting to go into organized activities, because then you have to keep the labor forever and ever, and they don't want to work that hard and so on and so forth after they come in. And that's where India's growth kind of got stunted till 1991-92. Later on, when the IT systems, when IT framework came in, IT framework doesn't have unions, doesn't have collective bargaining and so on and so forth. It has hire and fire and so on and so forth. Plus, there has been huge demand over the last 20 years, so there has been not too much of unionism happening. But somewhere in the line, India has to create a framework so that a person doesn't have a job security, because if he has a job security, the owner or the enterprise may not be able to survive for too long, because then the person starts demanding more, and that's what happened to our organized labor. And somewhere on the line, we need to we are in the mode of switching it to Western style social security in many of its small little details.
Thank you. Last question. The lady in white shirt.
So my question is there a difference between individuals being wealthier, and I think individuals have become wealthier, to a nation being wealthier? So has India as a whole become wealthier post-independence? And a follow-up to the question is, what constitutes wealth per se? So you've mentioned employment and healthcare for India, but are there any other aspects that you think is what determines whether India is a wealthy nation or not?
See, wealth has many sort of facets. I only discussed two because I had planned to talk about for 10 hours, but I was given 15 minutes. So I think I have covered only the surface of it. But as you would have figured, that wealth has many features and sort of many sub-features. And somewhere on the line, India, I mean, if you ask me, when India became independent, it was extremely poor overall. And also, most people didn't have many facilities. In last 67 years, India has come a long way. But India has longer way to go. So many people tend to think by looking at today, what we call a cross-section across space, not across time. So we look at India vis-a-vis America or Europe and say, India is poor, everyone is poor, or we get different facilities or different framework vis-a-vis other countries. But if you look at the time scale, time sort of scan, then from 1947 today, we have come a long way in terms of equality, because there is a wealth has also a concept of equity or equality. Somebody is going to talk about financial inclusion and all, which is a very interesting part of the wealth. Sort of, you compare yourself with your neighbors, and if they have slightly more, you start feeling poorer. Even if you have a billion, the next guy has, I mean, there is an Indian story. You remember a person did a lot of penance, and the God got pleased, and he asked the person saying, whatever you want, I give you, but I'll give double to your neighbor. So that guy thought, and he said, okay, take away my one eye. Okay. So wealth is also relative, and all of us need to be aware that for me, if I buy S-class Mercedes here, the chance of my going about 20 km/h is very remote, right, in Bombay. And so, similarly, if I buy Maruti 800 or a scooter, probably it might go faster and it might dent the S-class, right? Which is a good pleasure. It's part of the wealth.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chauhan.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Supriya Sopthi. I'm the Vice Chair of the LSC Alumni Association. I'd like to introduce our next guest, Mahesh Murthy, who spent over 3 decades in the AdMad world as a marketing genius, providing winning solutions to clients such as The Economist, Unilever, Pepsi, and MTV, to mention a few. After his creative stint in Hong Kong and India, Mahesh moved to the Silicon Valley, where he helped create and launch the first commercial version of Yahoo in 1995, and the Earth's biggest bookstore campaign for Amazon in 1997. Mahesh, it'd be interesting to know what your thoughts are about Amazon's announcement of the delivery drones. But before that, a little more about what you've done, and I'm going to keep it very brief. After a successful stint with e-com firms in the US, Mahesh returned to India to run Channel V. He then went on to set up Passion Fund to invest in startups, and that's what he does today. Now, many of you must have seen him on Bloomberg because he's part of The Pitch, which is a show that invests and supports some of India's brightest minds. They had their last episode, which was broadcast last week, but I think you'll have another series coming up soon. Maybe you'll be supporting some more young, bright minds. So guys, if you have $1 million dream and you want to convert it into reality, you might want to see him at the end of the room later. He's also the CEO of Pinstorm, India's digital-first brand management firm. And you know what? He didn't even have to go to university like you and I did to do all of this. So let's welcome our next guest, Mahesh Murthy, on stage to tell us more about what he does.
That that introduction is most certainly not taken from my LinkedIn profile. I think what's going to be fun here is, so I request to the organizers, if I can finish well before my 10 minutes, can we have more questions, because that'll be a lot more fun. Can we do that? So I don't think I have 10 minutes worth more than that to talk about. So what I do is a couple of things. I help run a venture capital fund called Seed Fund. We have 33 investees as of right now. And also invest as an angel, so that's about 40, 45 companies one is invested in after looking at maybe 10, 12,000 business plans. Also help run a company that does a lot of digital consulting and digital brand management for firms that seem to focus on the youth audience. That's that's what I do. I want to talk about this entire idea of attitudes to wealth and just keep it short. Maybe just cover the way it used to be, where we all come from, or where at least I come from, where it is now, and where I think it's headed to. So I come from a really traditional, conservative Tamilian Brahmin family, Iyer family, where my parents' dream was for me to go to IIT, go to IIM, join Intel, work in a 4x4 cubicle, then 5x5 cubicle, then 6x6 cubicle, then after 20 years, a 7x7 cubicle, have a 2.3 bedroom house with 1.2 cars and 2.3 kids, the standard Tamilian dream. And nobody in my family has ever been an entrepreneur. And it was a bit of a big surprise for them, and I just told them I didn't want to go to college, and the reaction was, well, you can't stay at home with us if you do that. So I've had the singular benefit of being on the streets since I was 17. And interestingly, when I look at the companies I've funded, one of the really interesting things that comes across is that none of our successful companies were ever founded by anybody who went to IIT or IIM, not one. Every one of these companies have been founded by people who probably didn't go to college or went to a very small college. In fact, the joke is that the small degree college outside IIM Ahmedabad is where the owner studies, and where he goes to employ the guy who studies at IIM Ahmedabad opposite. So our sense is always that in India, the reason for that is again that, many kids are driven to follow their parents' educational dream and their parents' dream. And parents have been, the dream of parents that relates to wealth is not about having crores and crores of rupees, but having a good job that's stable, that you can't get kicked out of, right? In my dad's time, it used to be working for the government, and which is why it's pretty odd that every IIT and IIM celebrates, ooh, our student got a job for 50 lakhs, forgetting that, the guy who started the company is probably taking 50 crores home a year, right? So we tend to celebrate the wrong kind of things out here. For us, for the longest time, our parents their idea of wealth was that just go get a solid, stable job, don't rock the boat. And hence, it's very curious that after studying 4 years of computer science at IIT Madras and 2 years of marketing at IIM Ahmedabad, kids go and join Goldman Sachs. Like it makes any sense, It's like I learned swimming for 4 years and run for 2 years and learned to become a pilot at the end of that. So there's absolutely no relevance in that education path that anybody is taking out there. Essentially, it just acts as a filtration system for somebody to go out there. So in some ways, if I use financial lingo, you're putting there's a put call or there's a collar that you say, okay, fine, get a job that you won't fall below this level. You won't go very high, but that doesn't matter. What's been happening out here? So I came back to India in '99. I've been investing for the last 14 years. And in the first couple of years, it was really, really tough. I'd go to a college, and I'd see, how many of you want to really run your own business, and 4 hands out of 100 would go up. Today, 85 hands or 95 hands out of 100 go up, right? That's the big change that's happened in the last 10, 15 years. Even our volumes are up. In the first, and we set up Seed Fund in 2006, and we probably got 200 plans that year in 2007. Last year, we got 2,155 plans, right? Which is an enormous number. It's virtually 170 or so plans a month after month. To put that in perspective, when I talk to my friends, everybody's plan volume has gone up, but that's an enormous number to get that kind of plans. So certainly, the bug is catching on. And many of these plans are coming from people who are not necessarily from the Ivy League elite. A lot of these super elite in the Ivy League, at least till about 2 years ago, we're still headed, or till 3 years ago, till 2008, 2009, Goldman and Lehman happened. We're headed to Goldman and Lehman. And when that fell, suddenly people had to figure out and say, okay, maybe Goldman Lehman isn't the place to be. Maybe I could really start a business. But it's still kind of working through the system where we still get plans. I mean, I remember sitting with 2 Harvard entrepreneurs who came to me and said, well, you know, we need $750,000. I looked at the plan up and down and said, I've looked at all your costs. It doesn't really come to more than $225,000. Why do you want $750,000? And the answer was, well, we've got to pay ourselves $250,000 salaries, right? And I said, why? I said, well, that's what we're benchmarked at. We are Harvard. So I think it took a while for me to kind of really explain to them that's not how life is lived out here, right? The other thing which is, again, really interesting is what I call the emerging kind of tech crunch India culture. Let me see what's happening. I mean, a lot of Indian industry is built on copy and paste. The entire, first 30, 40, 50 years of our industrial existence was the family houses figuring out, okay, how was cement made, getting a license and, pretty much owning a monopoly to print money for the region. Our entire background has been in copy-paste. Our entrepreneurs travel to Thailand, to Bangkok, to China to figure out what's happening, come and implement it out here. Sadly, this has also led to the same kind of issue happening even in business. So we want, if there's a Birchbox there in the US, suddenly you get 10 Birchbox plans in India. If there's Amazon there in the US, we get 10 Amazon copies out here. So there's 2 things that have been querying the pitch. One is the essential nature of business has changed in some ways. If in the 1990s and 2000s, and I was mentioning to somebody, if you looked at, say, pharma or automotives, even today, the biggest company in the world has a 20% market share, then 18%, and then the next one has 16 and 14 and 12 and 10%. That's how market shares trend in a lot of mature sectors. But if you look at the sectors that have really emerged in the last 5, 10 years, Google owns 90% of search, there's no number 2. After eBay, there's no number 2 in auctions. After Amazon, there's really no number 2 in e-com. After Facebook, there's no number 2 in social networking. After Twitter, there's no number 2 in microblogging. And it goes on and on. I mean, after Red Bull, there's really not much of a number 2 in energy drinks. So increasingly, we're coming to a winner-take-all world where market shares are now trending to 85, 8.5, 0.85, more than 2018-16. It's becoming a winner-take-all game. So from an investor's point of view, we really can't even look at a number 2 company, where once you would have been very happy to invest in Volkswagen or Toyota, whichever is the number 2 car maker in the world at that point in time. Today, you can't invest even after $6 billion. Bing is worth nothing, right? So it's become far, far more difficult for us to invest because we have to find that one winner in that winner-take-all, who's going to take all in that sector. So Redbus is our company, 85% market share, and whatever. So occasionally we hit it, we hit it right. And this only happens when you don't copy. I mean, unlike China, which has walls around it, and you can have the Google of China, which is Baidu, and you can have the Facebook of China, and you can have the Twitter of China, which is Weibo, and you can have the Amazon of China, and so on and so forth. But the Google of India is Google, the Facebook of India is Facebook, the Twitter of India is Twitter, and I do believe, much to the dismay of many of my colleagues, that the Amazon of India will be Amazon at some point in time, very soon enough, right? So, which makes it even more important for us to find gaps in the market which are, so hence, obviously, you can't copy-paste, US company here unless you stay small and you get acquired by them for a pittance, like maybe Bazi did. But the key thing is to find a solution to a unique Indian problem in a unique way and pretty much earn your way to solving that problem, right? I think one of the things that the rise of venture capital has done in India is really that a lot of people suddenly think, okay, fine, I didn't get a high-paying job, I'm going to get a VC to pay me a salary. And we have to go through a learning period where we have to learn how to come up with an original idea and bootstrap. We still haven't come up to the concept of, oh my God, I really have to take a risk and I really need to bootstrap. A couple of trends that I'm seeing out here. One is this entire I think in dollars thing. So we spend a lot of time telling people that don't come to us asking for money in dollars, come to us asking for money in rupees. Nobody accepts dollars on the street out here in India. The second is really entitlement. What do you mean you're not funding me? I am good, the plan is good. What do you mean you're not funding me? And the idea that somebody can say no is really, again, something that I think our young and bright ones haven't yet gotten. Of late, in the last couple of years, we've seen another disturbing trend, which is pretty much a decline in ethics, especially among founders. We don't know where it's so. In a couple of our companies, we had to really work very fast, shut them down and pretty much insulate ourselves because we found the founders pretty much dealing in issues which were significant, which involved significant loss of integrity, if not more. And maybe it comes down to the fact that we don't have business heroes anymore. I mean, once upon a time, we could say Tata and Infosys, but today, Tata is a company behind the 2G scam, and it's behind Colgate, and Infosys just paid a 200 crore fine for immigration fraud. Who's your hero? Who do you look up to anymore? We don't have, we don't have ethical heroes anymore. So maybe that's, and of course, as the earlier professor mentioned, the politicians who seem to make a lot of money are the ones who never seem to get behind bars. So I do sense a recent fall of ethics that's been happening out here. But I'm still hopeful that, these elections, an improved RTI system, a more powerful judiciary will help bring correctness and ethics back out here. I'll end on a few notes saying, okay, that was the past and the present. What do I look at going forward? I mean, much like, stock price, if you look at it very closely, it's just ups and downs, but you pull back and take a 20-year view, it's a curve that goes up, and that's my sense on India. We're still at the bottom of the curve. We have a long way to go. We have a lower cost of living. It's more fun living out here. For far less money than I had in the US, I can have a better standard of living out here in India. I do believe that this elections, one of the things that we've been looking at is, the role of digital and social media in terms of influencing voter selection or candidate selection. We think 120, 125 constituencies are liable to swing because of, of digital media reasons, which is pretty good in a parliament with 540 odd seats. It could be the first signs of our Arab Spring, though certainly by 2019 we will have our Arab Spring. It'll certainly happen. And my own sense is, this is not a market, this is not a place that you've got to be if you're a day trader. Buy the long call and stay put, and you'll make a lot of wealth out here. That's it. That's my thoughts. I'm happy to take questions if that's useful. So can we have more than 3 questions? Did we finish fast enough? More than 10 minutes, oh my God. Sorry, I'll keep the answers very quick. The gentleman there? Yeah?
Good evening, my name is Bhavik Muni.
Hi.
Thank you for the wonderful talk. Actually, I had a question regarding entrepreneurship and the wonderful work you're doing. So, we're hearing so many entrepreneurs coming up, like Zomato being valued 1,000 crores and wine being sold off for more than $300 million. So, when you look at a proposal and you look at a plan, do you think about how simple it sounds and how smart it is, or you require for a well thought out plan? Because I sometimes imagine a Zomato guy, the starter of Zomato, explaining a person before it's launched that, what we'll do, we'll come up with a software which talks about where the restaurants are. And the opposite person 3 years ago, when India didn't even have more than 5% people on the internet, must be making fun of that person, that how is it possible? So do you think that the simpler the plan is, works better, or do you think it's more, it needs to be an end-to-end?
So one of the things we deeply distrust is the bottom right-hand corner of an Excel spreadsheet that many MBA graduates tend to pull out, and it fills up all the numbers automatically and produces a 10-year plan. The minute we see that, we throw it out of the window, right? So we know certainly that there's, as somebody who runs a business myself, I can't see 2 quarters out. So when somebody can tell me that they can see, 48 quarters out, I know they're smoking dope, right? or they've gone to the wrong college or whatever, right? So yeah, to answer your question, we see no value whatsoever in any kind of, BS spreadsheet exercise. What we'd rather see is there a problem that you're solving? Can you solve it compellingly well? Can you take the dominant market share in that space? And is there a chance that we can exit either through an IPO or through a trade sale at the end of it? That's all we look at. Yeah? I hope that answers your question. The gentleman out here, and then the gentleman out there. I'll come to you third, sir.
My question is, I just heard something recently. Somebody said marketing in future will be like sex, and only the losers will have to pay for it.
Marketing in the future will be like sex, and the losers will have to pay for it.
What do you have to say on that?
First of all, I'm not even sure that the losers pay for it in sex. I'll pass that question, and it's deeply philosophical. I'll have to ponder on it a while, and we'll take that gentleman's question.
So, hello. So could you elaborate about the thought process of people who come from pedigree institutions okay? Guys who come from Harvard and guys who approach you, vis-a-vis guys like yourself who dropped out of college, and you might be having unorthodox ideas. What is your gut instinct or gut feel when you meet such people?
So essentially what we're really looking at is, your ability to take a leap and not hedge, right? So we really want people for whom there is no plan B. There is no plan B. And the more bridges you burn, that's really what we seek. It tends to be that the people who tend to come from the Ivy League colleges like to hedge, like to do the SWOT analysis, and like to do and that almost never works out as an entrepreneur. And we find that the people who've kind of committed and said, look, I'm just going to go do it and make it happen. And usually it correlates to a less Ivy League education, though not always, right? Though it's an attitudinal trait, are the ones that we actually trust to be entrepreneurs far more. Yeah? The gentleman out there, yeah.
Yeah, good evening, sir.
Hi.
This is Sankalp from sir. Sir, actually, for someone like me, if I want to start a company, e-commerce always makes much more sense than a brick and mortar company. But the biggest problem that I see in e-commerce is that there at every street and corner there is a Me Too company. Now, the biggest problem that I see is loyalty. Now, if I want to book a ticket, I can see Make My Trip, Yatra, Clear Trip, Ibibo. I can book 10 times from Make My Trip, but the 11th time, even if I'm getting 100 rupees discount from Yatra, I'll go to Yatra. So there's no loyalty ever in e-commerce. So how do you generate loyalty in e-commerce?
I wouldn't disagree that there's no loyalty in e-commerce. There's no loyalty in commodity e-commerce. So air travel is mostly commodity e-commerce. General merchandise is mostly commodity e-commerce. If you sell commodity, you will live and die by the sword, right? Which is why as whatever a Myntra and a whoever Jungly and whoever else are out there killing each other in the market. I do believe you can generate tremendous loyalty if you have a unique product, a unique offering, and you can grow by tremendous word of mouth. In fact, the single biggest indicator we see of success in India today in the online world is your ability to generate extraordinary word of mouth. We built Redbus into an 800 crore revenue company with zero media advertising, zero. All right? So in fact, one of our rules is, can you grow with zero media advertising? And the ones that are able to do that are the ones that we believe will survive and prosper. To be able to do that, the question is, can you offer something that's so incredibly, to use Steve Jobs' word, insanely delightful to use, that you would tell your friends about it? I mean, Facebook didn't advertise for you to start using it, and Amazon didn't advertise for you to start using it. So can you create a product that creates so much compelling, good vibes about it, that it spreads by word of mouth? To do that, you cannot obviously sell the same product at the same price. Right? So what you say is a problem, to me, is the most extraordinary opportunity. So we have an extraordinary wave of Me Too e-com companies that got funded and overfunded, and my sense is all of them will collapse. But if I look at it secularly, the demand from consumers is growing month after month. I have 6 companies in e-com, and we're doing nothing. The demand is growing by 5 to 10% per month, right? Per company. So we know consumer demand is rising. Consumers want e-commerce. Entrepreneurs haven't figured out yet how to provide it. And I think that's the opportunity.
Thank you, Mahesh.
I think we're out of it. You guys can tweet me. I'm at Mahesh Murthy. And I'm happy to answer your questions.
You're there for a while, right? After the event.
I'll be here for a while.
Yeah. So you can talk to him
Thank you.
personally. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Patrick Fowles. Patrick Fowles is India business editor of The Economist magazine based in Bombay, where he set up a new editorial bureau. He joined The Economist in 2008 and has been banking editor and finance editor. Finance correspondent. Pardon my reading today. He is the author of the 2011 Special Report on Business in India and the 2010 Special Report on Banking in Emerging Markets. Today, Patrick will be speaking on why scams are so prevalent in emerging economies. So join me in welcoming Patrick Fowles.
Thank you very much. I was trying to think of a way to explain and demonstrate corruption and scams in India, and I decided the best way was to describe a Sunday at my house. My children like to go swimming on Sunday, so I'm going to take you from the journey, take you on the journey from my house to the swimming pool. So you start at my flat. Now, to pay the rent on my flat in Bandra, I make a cash payment to an offshore bank account. I'm not exactly sure who the person who has that bank account is, but it seems to work. I write the check. I go down and get into a car whose driver is paid in cash, no questions asked. We drive on roads which are potholed, and if you believe the rumors, because the contracts to repair those potholes are corruptly awarded. Now we're heading south, so you hit the Sea Link Bridge, Mumbai's most impressive piece of infrastructure. When originally designed, the toll booths at the Sea Link were electronic Oyster cards that you could swipe. They've never really been taken up, and many people think the reason is because the right to operate the tolls is contracted out to third parties who prefer to have the cash receipts so they can corruptly use them. The bridge itself, as you probably know, was built by a tycoon called Mr. Gulab Chand. At the time the bridge was envisioned, Sharad Pawar was chief minister of this state. And the two men, as you probably, some of you will know, cooperated also on a real estate project near Pune called Lavasa, which many people think involved dodgy land deals. Both, of course, deny this. Sharad Pawar isn't a peripheral figure still. He's a member of India's cabinet. You get to the end of the bridge, and because it's Sunday, the cops will stop you for tinted windows or taking the wrong lane. 100 rupees slipped through the window will resolve that problem. Keep on going south, and you'll pass the flat of Mr. Kumar, who used to be the head of the municipal council here in Bombay, and who tried to clean up the real estate market. His estimate was that the value of illegal planning favors given to the building lobby in Mumbai amount to about $5 billion a year. That's an enormous sum. Forget it, though. Let's keep heading south. Eventually, at the junction at Breach Candy and Pedder Road, you'll pass the mansion of the Jindals. They're one of India's big industrial clans, and one of the three brothers, Naveen Jindal, is presently being investigated for alleged involvement in the coal scam, where the government gave out coal mines potentially on a dubious basis. He's also a Lok Sabha MP for the ruling party. But forget that too, continue south, and you eventually get to the swimming pool. But just as you lie there and think, God, I've had a respite from all of this, you may find out that the swimming pool, the club where this takes place, is itself now the subject of a corruption allegation, and the officials are accused of embezzling money and trying to illegally sell the land. So corruption in India, even for the rather rarefied experience of me as a foreigner, is pretty prevalent. What's a way of organizing our thoughts about this? Well, essentially there are two types of corruption. There's retail corruption, petty bribes paid to get around rules and speed up bureaucratic processes. I'm not going to talk much about that, but my view is technology will largely eradicate that over the next couple of decades in India. And we've seen that with the process for passport applications and train tickets, for example. The second kind is wholesale corruption, and that is big money exchanges between companies, politicians, and senior politicians. We all know the scams of the last few years: 2G, coal, iron ore in Karnataka, Goa, and Orissa, multi-billion-dollar scams that have incensed the Indian public. There are also more disguised forms of wholesale corruption, particularly at the moment, bad debts. And this is when tycoons who are essentially bankrupt can put pressure on the banking system to continue to roll over loans to them and keep them afloat. Kingfisher Airlines is a great example of this, and in a way one of the most distasteful. At the time, the airline, this is about a year ago, was essentially going belly up and refusing to pay its staff. Sid Mallya, the son of the promoter, was busy on his Twitter account, and I follow it closely as a key source of information on India. At the time, he tweeted in September 2012, "Just spent the morning playing volleyball with 12 bikini-clad models on the beach. Now I understand why people hate me." So wholesale corruption is distasteful, but is it really as severe as some people say? Well, by complete coincidence, last week I traveled around India talking to a variety of senior officials to get their view in private for a piece we're planning in January in The Economist. I started off in Hyderabad, where I spoke to one of India's most senior IAS officers, a household name. His view was 10 to 15% of IAS officers, no more than that. Only 10 to 15% of the cream were clean and motivated. Everyone else was either sort of partially on strike or actively corrupt. That's quite a scary number. In Bangalore, I went to the rather untidy and grimy office of Uday Veer Singh. Now, he runs an institution I'd never heard of, the Karnataka State Medicinal Plant Authority, but is, in fact, an Indian hero. About 3 years ago, at midnight, he and a few colleagues were standing outside a port called Belkri, in the middle of nowhere. At 6 a.m., they raided the port and uncovered one of the biggest scams India's seen, and that was the iron ore mining scam. 25-kilometer-long convoys of trucks were taking iron ore through the state to this port, where they were eventually loaded onto Chinese ships and taken to make steel in China. His work over the last 3 years has revealed a huge network that has essentially corrupted the entire state apparatus. So far, over 700 officials have been implicated in taking bribes, and a minister in the state government was also found to be orchestrating the scam. From there, I went to Delhi, and I interviewed one of the bosses of one of the 2 or 3 anti-corruption agencies in India. The key takeaway from this was, in the last 3 years, his count, 40 top officials have been accused or investigated for corruption, but not a single one had been dismissed. He scratched his head for a long time, and within living memory, he could think of 7 politicians, either senior politicians, so cabinet ministers or chief ministers, who had been formally investigated for corruption. And from that meeting, I think it's fair to conclude that there is almost complete impunity for senior people who get involved in funny business. The last meeting I had was with one of India's top economists, which was also in Delhi, and we tried to put some numbers on all of the things I've just described. What do those numbers say? Well, the latest survey, India is 94th out of 177 countries in terms of corruption. That survey has just come out. I think that actually largely measures retail corruption, but nonetheless is a sort of middling performance. If you add up the value of all of these scams, so the value taken by businessmen, very imprecise science, but you get to about 3 or 4% of India's GDP, very big sum. That has essentially been taken from the public. If you look at concentration of wealth in the private sector, about 40% of India's stock market is controlled by dynastic families. As a point of comparison, Russia in 2000, which was probably the peak of Russia's oligarch period when tycoons were becoming very wealthy by manipulating the government, the equivalent percentage was about 60%. So India's not quite as bad as Russia on that measure, but isn't far off. And lastly, if you take India's 46 billionaires, 20 of them are essentially active in what you might call rent-seeking industries, so businesses that interface with the government like infrastructure, energy, and where manipulating the bureaucracy is a competitive advantage. So I think the picture is not absolutely terrible, but it's clear corruption is a pretty big problem. The cost of corruption, what does this actually mean for society, is threefold. There's the basic question of fairness. The rich get richer, the poor lose out. But you don't have to be a bleeding heart to object to corruption, because the frictional cost to the economy has become incredibly high. Because some industries are surrounded by controversy, legitimate and clean companies are no longer investing in them, and telecoms is the best example. That decline in investment is the single biggest reason why India's economy is now growing much slower than it was 5 years ago. So corruption has a very clear economic cost. I mentioned the banking system, but it also makes the financial system less stable because the banks are sitting on lots of dud loans to crony capitalists. Why has corruption got so bad? I mean, some people might say at this point, well, look, India's, like lots of other countries, has always had corruption. And if you look at the 1980s, there was the Bofors scandal, which almost brought down the Gandhi family, but not quite. You also had, at that stage, the emergency of new companies adept at manipulating the bureaucracy, like Reliance Industries, where the company was sort of built on a clever arbitrage of the rules. But I would argue that things have got worse for several reasons. One is simply India's economy is much bigger than it used to be, and asset prices have risen dramatically. So the value of things like land are colossal, and they've overwhelmed institutions. Reform in India has also changed from relaxing rules to what you might call balance sheet reform. It's happened in lots of other countries, but it involves taking assets owned by the public and putting them in the private sector. That can be explicit processes like licenses and coal mines, which you want to essentially privatize. But it can also be more complex things like public-private partnerships where businessmen get the right to levy tolls on the public. All of those procedures and processes are open to exploitation. And the last cause is pretty obvious, but it is fragmentation of politics. The big two parties now have less than 50% of the vote, and to keep a coalition at the center, you have to basically pay money to the smaller parties. And the 2G scandal was that in action. Manmohan Singh essentially turning a blind eye to the DMK from Tamil Nadu as they engaged in large-scale corruption because he relied on the DMK to have a working Lok Sabha majority. Just as things have got worse, they could get better. What are the solutions? The cliche, of course, is India needs better institutions, and one of the things that I find a little bit weird is everyone is always trying to invent new pieces of legislation or new institutions and pieces of bureaucracy to manage corruption. But I think that's, in a way, unnecessary. We're just duplicating the machinery. Instead, I think you can point to two things. Faster courts. Lalu Prasad, the chief minister of Bihar, has just gone to jail. It took 17 years to get him there. Amazing. And secondly, electoral finance, as we heard from Dr. Banerjee. But elections, the coming election will probably cost $2 or $3 billion. None of that money, or virtually none, can be raised legally because of the campaign finance limits, which forces politicians to raise black money and implicates the entire political class in corruption.
You have 1 minute left.
The trouble with those is reforming the judicial system and electoral finance are basically about the two hardest things you can do in any democracy. And to actually do that, you require a groundswell of political support and voters actually acting. Now, the optimistic view is that's happening right now. And if you look at Delhi today, we have an anti-corruption party that could win a big chunk of the vote. Optimists will also point to the media in India and say it's uncovering scams. And even the stock market, the value of corrupt companies, if you track them, has actually fallen sharply in the last 3 years, suggesting investors no longer want to put money in dirty businesses. But there is a pessimistic view as well, and that's based on history, and simply that corruption, countries that have big corruption problems, it takes decades to sort out. And in America, the 1870s was the Gilded Age when tycoons had completely corrupted politics and controlled the private sector too. And the joke was that an honest man is one who once bought stays bought. It took America till the 1930s to clean up its system, and that was the growth of the middle class and the educated class. And the pessimistic case for India is that it might take us long. You wonder what my view is. I'll tell you, but I'd like to have 500 rupees from each of you first. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. We'll just take one question due to paucity of time. Yeah, gentleman, the pink shirt.
Hello, thank you very much for your views on corruption. At the same time, I think other speakers also mentioned the silver lining that we have in India despite...
Sorry, could you start again? I didn't hear the beginning. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. I said thanks very much for your views. I think all the other speakers mentioned about the silver lining in India, and I think that is also very critical. One question for you. I think the Indian politicians have a lot of money in Swiss banks, which is very close to UK. And okay.
Why don't you come to the front and ask your question? And we can...
So I think one question is...
Just one question, please.
Yeah, Indian politicians have a lot of money in Swiss banks, I think, which is very close to UK, and how you can help in getting it back to India as a part of your...
So your question is Swiss bank accounts and
how could you help as a part of a developed nation to get it back to India and use it for the good development in India as well?
It's actually quite a good question. Last year, the New York Times won a Pulitzer Prize by showing that the Premier of China and his family had $3 billion stashed in private companies, and they followed the money trail all the way. Now, no one in India's media world, nor my peers in the sort of foreign correspondent world, have actually managed to do that in India. And there are reasons why it's actually incredibly difficult, largely because India's politicians are incredibly clever. You're right. I think if it was possible to show in the agonizing detail how the money flowed from big business to top politicians, I think it would be a huge breakthrough. So I'm afraid I haven't done it yet, but I will endeavor to.
We'll take one more question. Let's take the girl in pink. Sharon.
The point you said about electoral financing, how do you propose that if politicians do not raise money from businesses, how do they go about raising money for elections, is what I want to ask.
Well, you basically take the American model, which is you legalize corruption. So it's not an ideal, but basically it becomes more transparent who is paying who. I think the problem in India is not that business pays for elections, which is ultimately what happens in a lot of countries. It's simply that we don't really know how it works. So by making it by making it transparent, I think it goes some way to solving the problem.
Thank you so much, Patrick. It was a wonderful talk.
Thank you.
Supriya.
Thank you, Patrick, for taking us through your Sunday. I think a lot of us here would agree we deal with these problems on a day-to-day basis. But there's something about India that's really exciting that brings us or keeps us here. And I guess the elections next year, hold some surprises. Hopefully, we'll see what happens. But moving on, our last guest for the evening is Deval Sanghvi, who's a partner and co-founder at Dasra, India's leading strategic philanthropy foundation, working with philanthropists and social entrepreneurs to create large-scale social change. He's provided philanthropists with intelligent investment strategies, directing over $38 million into the Indian social sector over the past 14 years. Deval incubated the Indian Philanthropy Forum and engaged over 500 philanthropists, multilateral agencies, and corporate foundations who are driving the philanthropy agenda here in India. He also initiated India's largest collaborative giving platform, Dasra Giving Circles, which combines in-depth research, funding, and managerial support. Deval's here this evening to talk about the rise of social entrepreneurship in India. Let's invite him on stage to do that.
Great. When I was told I was going to speak last, I didn't realize I was going to speak after Patrick and The Economist. So I apologize. My facts and figures are nowhere comparable to what Patrick is able to give you guys. The theme of the day, I guess, has been money. And it's a great day in sort of the age of humanity, I guess, is that I'm probably the only one who's talking about money, and I'm talking about the nonprofit sector. And the figure I guess I want to throw out is 18,000 crores. 18,000 crores is the number that potentially will come into the nonprofit sector with the passing of this latest CSR bill. 18,000 crores is not just a lifetime of funding, it's annual funding that's going to enter this sector because of this law. The ability to use those funds effectively is phenomenal. Many of you guys may or may not support the CSR bill. For those of you who don't know, in Parliament recently, a bill was passed mandating companies with 1,000 crores of revenues or more have to give 2% of their after-tax profits to the nonprofit sector, hence 18,000 crores. Now, when this rule was talked about 3 years ago, many of our corporations that are listed on this stock exchange were adamant about this law not being passed. They were adamant of how this will actually set the Indian corporate sector back because you're in essence mandating that they provide funds to the development sector, i.e. creating a tax which is in addition to the taxes they were already paying. Unfortunately, those same corporates did not take into account that 97% of our population lives under 300 rupees a day. Because of that statistic, 3% of our population pay taxes. So if you do the math, you very quickly realize the economic model that we have in India today cannot be one that's followed by the West, because their statistics are inversely related. Their poverty lines are usually 10 to 15 to 20% maximum of the population, where their tax-paying citizens are usually 80 to 90%. We, on the other hand, like I said, have 3% of the population that pays income taxes and 97% that live below the poverty line. Therefore, whether you're a corporate or not, one needs to realize, in terms of macroeconomics, you need other policies that will enable people to be lifted out of poverty. And unfortunately, the government has to create rules and regulations such as this CSR bill that ensures inclusive growth for all. So the next question is, 18,000 crores coming into the sector, what happens next? How is it going to be handled? How is it going to be dispersed? How are organizations actually going to move the 700 million people out of poverty that we have in our country today? And after spending 14 years on the ground at Dasra, working with organizations, working with the nonprofit sector, helping to deploy a large amount of capital and scale some of the most leading organizations, not only in India, but globally, I think we've realized it's fairly simple. Invest in adolescent girls. Invest in adolescent girls, you say, but why? Because we have 113 million adolescent girls in the country, or 20% of the world's adolescent girl population reside in India. Now, many of the corporates we've spoken to have said, but these girls are not going to get jobs because of the orthodox families that they live in, so why invest in them? Shouldn't we invest in their male counterparts? Because that's where economic growth occurs. Those same corporates don't realize that because of lack of investment in adolescent girls, we lose about $110 billion in our GDP because these adolescent girls are becoming mothers at the age of 15, 16, and 17. And surprisingly, the economic backlash of having babies at the age of 14, 15, 16, and 17 is far greater than their male counterparts at the ages of 19, 20, and 21 getting jobs at Cafe Coffee Day. And that's really the question at hand, is how do we create a new generation of individuals who are born with cognitive abilities, who are nutritioned at a level that they can grow between the ages of 0 to 3, not after, and more importantly, how do those children actually lead our country out of poverty? Some other statistics about adolescent girls, which we found was somewhat interesting about India. First of all, 47% of girls between the ages of 11 and 19 are underweight in India. 47%. Again, future mothers. 56 of them are anemic, and 43% are married before the age of 18. 58% of girls drop out by the age of 15. The next time they participate in any other government system is when they have had babies. Finally, 4 million adolescent girls in India between the ages of 15 and 19 give birth every single year. And in India, we have 3,600 children dying every single day under the age of 5, primarily those children whose mothers are teenagers. This is why it's important to invest in adolescent girls. Last December, and again earlier this year in Mumbai, we've had horrid statistics, or excuse me, incidences on rape, gang rape. And while that shocked our country and brought people out into the streets to march, to create action, to ensure that 8, 9, 10 individuals are guilty in 2 different regions, we don't realize that 97% of domestic violence actually happens with people you know. 97%. So while we have some phenomenal laws and we were able to fast track the court system for 2 or 3 cases, we didn't realize that 97% of the perpetrators are actually individuals that the victims see every single day. And the ramifications of domestic violence, again, are significant, not just on an economic basis, but also in a power basis. The second a mother is faced with domestic violence, she has less say on where the money goes. She has less say on investing in their children's education. She has less say on investing in their healthcare. She has less say on building healthy, strong families. 70% of our women face domestic violence. 70%. Violence in India kills and disables as many women between the ages of 15 and 44 as cancer. So while we have phenomenal movements with pink ribbons talking about cancer, no one's unfortunately talking about the women who are dying or being abused in domestic relationships. Another form of domestic violence is child marriage. 40% of our marriages are child marriages, and we have the highest share of the world's 60 million child marriages, the highest percentage. These are issues that if we don't combat today, we will see the ramifications tomorrow. So while our politicians, our news channels, and our media speak about currency devaluation, current accounts, and issues regarding agriculture because of the monsoons, they're actually not focusing on the main issues, which are adolescent girls. The good thing is, we have 18,000 crores to help this community. 18,000 crores from business individuals, leaders, to invest in these girls' futures, enabling India to actually become a superpower versus where we are today. So from a Dasra perspective, while we don't necessarily think governments should have to force individuals to give to charity, we're strong believers of the responsibility that comes from wealth. And that responsibility is to uplift others. And it's unfortunate that in a country like India, we have to actually mandate that that upliftment happens versus having it happen naturally. Thank you.
Thank you, Deval. Thank you so much for that. There's no doubt that inclusive growth in this country is something we should all be thinking about. And I think it doesn't hurt to think about what you can do to bridge the poverty gap yourself. So I hope that will be something that we're all taking away with us today. But before we close, 3 questions for Deval.
CSR Act, which gives 2% into the CSR fund by some companies which exceed a threshold about 1,000 crores in profit, I believe. Now, this is a slightly different question. I want to ask you, the government has proposed 2% through the CSR bill, but do they have any mechanisms to ensure that this 2% which the companies will give will not maybe go into wrong hands or into such projects which are not really impactful? Or do we also have some room for corruption in that space as well? What has the government or the lawmakers or the people who are proposing the bill have ensured that things run smoothly and we have less leakages coming out of this?
Yeah, I mean, I think unfortunately our government hasn't assured that their current policies, regardless of 2%, i.e. 98% of what happens in this country, there's very little action taken to combat against corruption, as Patrick mentioned. And so I think, unfortunately, your question, while it's very valid, many corporates use that as an excuse to not even provide that 2%. And I think clearly, if government takes action, there's so many other areas on corruption that will need to come first before the 2% actually gets hit. That being said, there's no reason why the 2% can't go to actually solve this particular issue. And so while it may be a 40-year gap or a 60-year gap, there are organizations and institutions that India has, such as ADR, PRS, Mumbai Votes, India Spends, and others, that focus on government transparency and accountability, holding everyone to test. Therefore, if a corporate is so adamant that what will happen with this 2%, I would advise those corporates to actually invest in organizations that focus on public policy and transparency, ensuring that the 2% and, more importantly, the 98% is being spent more wisely.
Hello, sir. What would be your priority list if you had the 18,000 crores to spend? I mean, what are the sectors that you would actually put, like not sectors, but in what ways would you actually help adolescent girls, maybe elderly people, maybe people below the poverty line? So I want to know your priority list.
Sure, no, it is very clearly adolescent girls. It's daughters, not mothers. It's the 13, 14, 15, 16-year-olds who will be running the households, i.e. running the country. I think when you look at empowering adolescent girls, there's 4 main areas. These same areas apply to empowering anyone. Education, health, sexual reproductive health, rights, and livelihoods. So I think it's a combination of all sort of aspects of life that have enabled us to sort of have a level playing field and grow and prosper and sit in rooms like this. But I think, again, the focus needs to be for this particular conversation, this particular group of individuals who have been overlooked for way too long.
Thank you.
There's someone in the really back who's sort of waving her hands. Sorry, just because we haven't had anyone from the back, I thought. Capacity building. I think human capital. And it's the same thing in the for-profit sector, honestly. I think the difference, though, is in the for-profit sector, we all understand and believe in the need to train and invest in the individuals who run our companies. On the nonprofit sector, on the other hand, we all think that that's a waste of money, that's an overhead expense, that's an admin expense. As the government of India has shown us time and time again, if you don't actually have good managers and checks and balances and controls, chances are you're not going to create the impact that you want to create. And unfortunately, donors and corporates are the most to blame of not funding that with nonprofit organizations. Thank you.
So with that, we're going to close the session. And before closing, first of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Karen Wooden Rodriguez, and I'm the co-president of the Columbia Alumni Association of India, along with Lisa. And we'd like to, first of all, thank our speakers so much for taking the time to be here. Please join me in thanking them with a round of applause. I was just discussing this with Lisa, and she was saying that in a country like India, where wealth and poverty coexist in such a stark manner, it's hard to think about wealth and money. And I'd like to thank our speakers for leaving us with these insightful thoughts and statistics to really try to grapple with it ourselves. To close, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the Columbia Alumni Association, who is a co-host of this event. We're very proud to present an event like EVOKE along with our partners, the British Deputy High Commission, the London School of Economics, Alumni Association, Begin Bombay Stock Exchange, and Citi. And I want to tell you about what the Columbia Alumni Association is, what we do, why we do it, and how you can get involved with us. What are we? We are a group of recent and old alums from Columbia. What do? We host events across the city that range from professional events, academic lectures, professional events, and social networking events. Why do we do this? Because we believe in the value of bringing an academic culture and making it accessible to the public in Bombay. How you can get involved with us, it's very simple. We are committed to hosting high-quality events for the public, and if you like this event, we'd like to hear about it. If there are things that you liked and things that you did not like about it, we'd also like to hear about it in a constant endeavor to bring the best quality of events to you. So with that, I'd like to thank you all for joining us, and please stay here to talk to the speakers and interact amongst ourselves.
On behalf of EVOKE India, Lisa and I thank you for being here. You can have a word with the speakers, and do join us on our social network, Facebook and Twitter, to stay updated for more events that we are planning in the future. Thank you. Thank you, Citibank. Thank you, BSC. Thank you, Begin. Your support was really important for us to make this happen. Thank you.